Hi, my name's Ken Poirier, and today we're going to be talking about interpersonal communications and specifically listening skills. Now, as we go through life, we experience a reality that we call perception. This is made up of amalgamation of all of your senses, your sights, your smells, tastes, sounds, body feelings that you may have, internal, external, and it all comes together into a world, a giant simulation of the world, in which we call perception. Okay, and then cognition is the way in which we handle this perception, the way we choose what parts of this perception are important and what parts are not, and how the things we're perceiving relate to each other. So when we receive messages, which can be communicated in a variety of different ways, they're coming from all sorts of different directions. So right now my computer fan's making some noise, and somebody's trying to contact me on Facebook, and my cat's in the next room meowing because he wants some treats, and all sorts of things are happening. And what I'm trying to do is to stay focused on communicating to you, but likewise, when other people talk to us, it can be difficult sometimes to focus on what it is they're saying and really absorb that information. So when we have all these different sounds and sights and all this information coming in, and we choose specifically that we're going to listen to only certain bits of information, well, I can't make that computer fan sound stop as much as I would like it to. I can block it out. I can ignore it and focus on other things. This is called selection. Another word for selection, specifically when talking about people, is called attending. We give them our attention. We attend to what they're saying. Say you're in a bus terminal and there's lots of people talking, and we want to pinpoint a specific person out there who's trying to communicate a message to us from across the bus terminal. And so when we're trying to attend to that one person who's far across on the other side of the bus terminal, or even if they're just like right next to you and maybe you're watching a movie or something and they say something to you, and you attend to them, that's called selective listening. You have multiple sources, and you're trying to select who that you're listening to. So when I was doing my listening project, this particularly came up because I was looking ahead at the questions, trying to decide, okay, where do I want to steer this next? So I was taking in information off of the page I was looking at, while also trying to attend to what the person was saying, and try to match those two up. And when in doing so, it made both tasks equally difficult, to pay attention to what the person's saying and pay attention to what's written on the page. And I had to kind of like take what they were saying and put it in like a buffer while I was reading, and then when I was done reading, I would look back up to them and I'd be running through that buffer of dialogue that they just said while I was trying to read and couldn't think about, and then take that and incorporate it into what they were saying. I'm guessing during the pauses, because when you talk, like there's spots where you're not taking in information, and that gives you a little second to catch up and go over that information again. Now, simply because I was attending to both the speaker and to my notes, now that doesn't mean that I was being insensitive in my listening. Insensitive listening is when you hear what somebody says and you're responding to the not important information. So to give an example of insensitive listening, it was like, I think last year, there was a scientist by the name of Matt Taylor, and he had just landed a space probe on a comet. It was like world history, like achievement of mankind type situation. Instead of people listening to what he had to say about, him landing that rocket or probe or whatever it was on the asteroid, instead everybody was like, "Hey man, what's up with that shirt you're wearing?" So that's an example of insensitive listening. Instead of listening to what the person is saying, that's really important and part of the conversation, kind of veering off the subject into what is more important to the listener than the person speaking. So one of the things that's really important to remember when you're listening is that you're not only listening to get the information that you want, you're also listening to give the other person an opportunity to convey the information that they want to convey to you. Several things that you can do to be a better listener, and I implored several of these in my interview with Joelle. She was the person I interviewed, and the first rule is talk less. That was one thing that I did right off the bat. Is I made sure not to comment on anything. Even when she was fishing for me to give a response on something, I just flat out wouldn't say anything. Towards the end of the conversation, we did get into kind of a rapport, a little back and forth, at which point it was no longer so much an interview as us just talking. So at that point we decided to stop. But initially I just asked the question, and I just sit there and wait for the answer. And if she asked me a question, I would just sit there and continue just to wait for the answer, or say, what do you think about that? Kind of like I guess a psychologist would. A great interviewer to check out is Charlie Rose, who does this exceptionally well. He simply just asks questions and never really tries to put his own opinions or spins on things unless he's really pressed for it. Number 2, get rid of distractions. When I did the interview, I set up an interview space where we were both equally positioned. There was no kind of high-low kind of situation. We were both like basically seated, squatted, legs crossed from each other, at arm's length from each other. No tables or anything like that. Just the two of us in a space by itself, which I think was really great. Rule number 3, don't judge prematurely. One of the biggest problems we have when we're talking on, say, Facebook, for example, is we say, hey, you're a socialist, therefore you're a bad person. Oh, you're a Republican or conservative, therefore you're a bad person. Well, you're an atheist, so therefore you're an immoral person, and so on and so forth. And it's really, it's really not it's counterproductive to actually having a conversation of any sort. So it's always best not to try to judge people and assume that they're automatically going to be wrong because of whatever position they're coming from or whatever kind of ideas they're trying to share. And then, of course, rule number 4 is to look for key ideas, find those common grounds, find those things where you both agree on the same thing, and try to focus on that and try to build on each other's knowledge of the topic. And I think that's really the best thing you could ever hope for to get out of a conversation, because if you can't do that, then why are you having the conversation in the first place? Anyway, my name's Ken Poirier, and thank you for listening to this small lecture on interpersonal communication and listening.